I'm delighted to announce that this podcast is now sponsored by the Hedon Boxing Academy. It is Ireland's most popular boxing and fitness class. They have 3 locations across Dublin, located in Sandyford, Lansdowne and Grand Canal Docks. You burn over 600 calories during a class and also get to meet new people and enjoy yourself, as the staff there are really, really great. And I do mean that. So go check out their site. It's linked below, or else can be found at hedonboxing.ie, and sign up for their 10 class program while you're at it. And if you DM them on Instagram or email them through their website with the discount code Rallen, you will get 10% off the usual price. So how's that for a deal? All you got to say is Rallen and you get 10% off, just like that. First 10 classes, 10%. Great deal. So get involved, get fit, and bring some positive energy to that place. I'm telling you now, you will not regret it. It's great for whatever fitness goals you have. Just go, use the discount code, and thank me later. Welcome to the latest episode of Rant. My guest today is Royce Dunne. Royce is a CrossFit athlete from Australia and has been doing CrossFit for several years and trains with the likes of Rich Froning. Now, Royce, thanks a lot for coming on the show. And first and foremost, how is everything with you today?
Feeling pretty good now on the mend a bit. Had a nasty flu last week, but bouncing back.
Good stuff. Well, first of all, I just want to get to know a bit about your past and, you know, what kind of shaped you growing up. And like, say, for instance, when you're a teenager, it's not exactly the most common thing, especially back 15, 20 years ago, to wanting to be grown up and become a CrossFit athlete, because it wasn't the cultural phenomenon it is today. So, like, did you always have a kind of interest in fitness growing up? Were you kind of active? And like, how did you kind of shape and get geared towards eventually becoming the type of athlete you are now today?
Definitely active as a kid, played a lot of sports, played Australian football, actually obviously here in Australia. And when I got into high school, kind of just got a bit obviously busy with more academic stuff and kind of fell off the sports side. And I just discovered through one of my gym teachers, just normal gym, just traditional, going to the gym and just getting fit and lifting weights and something other than specifically just a sport. And I kind of fell in love with that, did that for a few years, and then kind of just accidented my way into the fitness industry as a PT. And I was doing that for a couple of years, and one of the PTs I worked with mentioned that you can get all these great ideas for programming and for workouts for your clients off of a website called CrossFit.com. All the workouts are up there for free and really good stuff. So I went and checked it out, and I liked the look of some of the workouts, so I started doing a couple, and I just got hooked. Like I think most people's story with CrossFit is you do 1 or 2 workouts, just get addicted, and then kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, so to speak. And were you in college purely focusing on with the view to becoming a personal trainer one day? Was there a moment where you kind of had to go down the fitness route, or else a more practical business type solution job, or was it always set on being at very least a personal trainer and then getting into the fitness industry that way?
No, yeah, it was a bit of an accident. I was at uni studying something else. I was in the sciences, and I just wasn't enjoying it. Wasn't enjoying study. Wasn't keen to jump back into uni straight after school. And someone just suggested to me, said, "Hey, you like gym, you like being active, you like fitness. Why don't you go be a personal trainer or just try it out for a while?" And I thought, yeah, what's to lose? So I went and checked it out, got some information on some of the courses, and did a couple of years, and could always come back to uni later. So went and did that, and yeah, fell in love with it.
Like, I remember my first ever attempt, what was it, about 7 or 8 years ago at this stage, into the CrossFit world. And at that stage, it's grown so much, both professionally and also in a kind of local way as well. Even in Ireland now, there's so many more gyms and there's much more information about it. But like, when I initially got into it, I was just thinking, right, this is completely unlike everything I've ever done. I had a rugby background, so everything was all geared towards strength and just being basically as explosive and whatever you could be. But then, as you were saying, you go on, get a WOD generator, you'd be getting tested in every single facet of your kind of condition. So for someone who was a bit chubby back then, like myself, I found the row machine, stuff like that, absolute hell. Well, then some of the power lift elements I found to be a lot easier. But like, was there certain elements straight away where were you thinking, okay, maybe this actually isn't the best idea for me? Or were you just very much determined going, I actually like this, and by God, I'm going to keep working at this to make sure that I level out in every single area?
Yeah, I think it was a bit more of the latter. There was certainly a lot of movements. I'd say almost the vast majority of them that I would consider a weakness or I wasn't good at. There was only a few things that I found that came naturally to me. A lot of the movements that require any kind of mobility or flexibility, I wasn't very good in the positions and struggled a lot. But yeah, it was a case of I think, well, if I'm bad at this stuff without knowing about it, it doesn't matter if I'm bad at it when I do know about it. I think people, a bit of a block for a lot of people when they try something new is that, you always hear people say that, like, oh, I discovered how bad I was at this. And it's like, yeah, you were bad at that already. Now you just know. So running away from something, it gave you that challenging kind of problem / overcome kind of mentality that you miss from sports. About problem solving. I can't do this now. I've got to figure out a way to overcome this weakness or learn this skill or progress. There's always a progression every day new to learn, and I found that really.
Okay. Yeah, so no, that's an interesting aspect of it. And I always found what I found with myself was after about 3 or 4 weeks, I found my body basically just breaking down on me. And that's when ultimately I stopped and reverted back to what I know. But like the one thing I look at when you look at there's so many different types of conditioning, whether you look at bodybuilding, you just see these giant men who are just physically just absolutely insane. You then look at maybe the more athletic side of things. You look at maybe the weightlifters who can do the Olympic lifts or even the F45ers, if you want to call them. And the one thing that always kind of amazed me about whenever I saw some of the top CrossFit athletes was that they just pretty much were just built and performed like machines, because across the board, they couldn't really afford to, if they wanted to be one of the top guns, they couldn't really be, too muscle bound and not have enough cardio, or vice versa, or they couldn't be too reliant on a certain lift, because you never know that this lift or X and Y could pop up. So, like, I suppose the question at the end of this that I'd like to ask is, it's a bit like bodybuilding in the way they have to sculpt certain parts of their body, and maybe if they have not a defined chest, they need to work extra on that. Like, is it very much just repetition, 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 just do whatever workout you have? Or is there specialized training in your case where you're like, okay, my clean's not that good, or my rowing's not that good, or my cardio isn't as good? Do you specifically have time to look at those areas, or is it just you need to work on everything and just hopefully it all just gathers pace and gets up to the level required to compete at the top level?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, which I feel like a lot of prospective CrossFitters or guys who come into CrossFit from a different sporting background who want to have a go at it as a competition aspect really struggle with that formula, I suppose. And in my opinion, it's kind of like the best analogy I ever heard for it was one of the OGs of CrossFit, one of the original coaches and athletes, Chris Spieler. He said it like, if you went on your winter holidays, went out to a ski resort and just hit a couple of slopes and had a good time on your holiday, it's a very different kind of skiing to the guy who's training for the Olympics. It's both still skiing. The principles are still the same. You do your little 1 hour lesson with the instructor and he teaches you the same ideas, but it's just a different mentality, and you might get a few bruises and bumps, but the goal when you're skiing recreationally is not to hurt yourself. And but the Olympic athlete is pushing the limits, and if an accident happens in pursuit of a gold medal, it's kind of almost like it's not good, but it's like, well, that's the price you pay in a way. Like, that's the mentality. Like, people are willing to put their body on the line when it comes to sport, and so it's a similar thing with CrossFit, where I think they always talk about intensity, but I think what people forget, and they mention this in the level 1, it's relative intensity. So if you're relatively inactive or haven't lifted much weight before, or you're coming off the couch, even just doing like a couple of rounds of rowing and burpees relatively slowly for 7 or 8 minutes is going to feel pretty intense. Like that's going to be a good workout for that person. And so it's up to the coach and a good gym to help someone taper into the CrossFit training. Get to the point where they're doing what a lot of CrossFitters do, where they're training 7 days a week and going hard out and trying to race the clock and all that stuff that kind of CrossFit's known for. That takes some time to build up, I think, and if people jump in too quickly, that's when the injuries happen. And it's the same mentality when it comes to the competitive arena. Like you said, honestly, a lot of it at the start is kind of throw the rice against the wall and see what sticks. And it will take someone a good 2 to 3 years to even understand what truly is their weakness. Like someone might think their clean is their weakness. My clean is really, really low compared to my deadlift and my squat. But with a bit of technique and a bit of mobility work, within a couple of months, all of a sudden your clean might jump up to being back in line where it should be. So it wasn't really a weakness. You just had to learn the skill a bit more. So it takes you a good 2 or 3 years to kind of round out yourself and get enough exposure to the different elements that you even know what it is that you're actually bad at. Because certain movements will forever dog you as a bit of a weakness, and some movements will always be your strength. Just how it goes with all athletes, I think, in all aspects of all sports. Just some things click, some things don't. But that takes time to reveal. There's a lot of red herrings along the way where you think that this is a weakness of mine, but it's purely because you've only done it 3 times. You suck at everything when you start. So it really is a case of like you got to put the hours in, as you said, the repetition, just to expose yourself to as many things as possible, as often as possible. And then when you start to get a picture of that, when that starts to shape and you can see where things click and where they don't, then you can talk about more specific training and working on weaknesses and getting a specialized coach for certain movements and so on. But I think people rush to that stage way too early.
Like, I suppose a good example would that be like, most people, say common fans of CrossFit, or even maybe not fans, people who are just aware of it, like Rich Fronen's probably a good example of that, where the much publicized kind of struggles he had on the rope climb several years ago when he was deemed the favorite and everything was going well and he became unstuck there. And then I remember seeing interviews after, and obviously everyone just kept asking him, oh, what about the rope climb? What about the rope climb? But he always reverted back to the fact that he was saying, listen, it was just a thing that I just wasn't good at and I need to get better at. And I suppose when you think of gym culture and the masculinity that comes with it, it's not all about egos, but there is big egos in there, and you want to lift as much weight as possible and get as much of a pump on as possible. But as you touched on there, is there a certain element of, and especially with the coaching, and say, as you were saying there, you've done a bit of coaching yourself, and then obviously people coach you certain lifts. Is there a certain element where, whether you're part of a team or you're getting coached individually, that there's really no room for ego in this kind of arena? Because if you have that big of an ego, it's number one going to come back to bite you in the ass eventually. And secondly, as you pointed out, you're not going to be able to pick up on the actual weak points of your overall performance.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's I think it's true across all sports that if you want to be great, not just good, not just above average or a hero in a small pond. If you want to be great, you have to be humble, and you see it all the time in the class. The people with egos, they either get hurt from their own undoing, or they quit. Because if you have an ego about you and you're good at a few things and you can top the leaderboard a few times, eventually the tables turn and there'll be a movement that you're not good at, and someone who you think that you should be better than will beat you. And if you're humble about it and say, well, that's just how it goes, and there's no weight class in CrossFit, so the little guys get their day and the big guys get their day, and it all kind of evens out. But if you don't have that mentality, if you have the mentality that you're got a big ego and you're the best and everyone else, no one can touch you, when you get beaten that day, it's gonna make you quit. You're gonna say, "This is stupid. CrossFit sucks. Well, I don't like these movements or whatever," and then you kind of just eventually wash out. And there's a great story I remember reading about Tiger Woods back when he was on his first rise, when he was this up and comer and doing exceptionally well, and he was actually number one in the world at the time, and he got a new coach who told him he had to change the way he holds his club. And he said, if you change the way you hold your club, you can be like one of the greats ever, like the best. Right now, you're good, but you could be better. And Tiger, who lives to perfect his game, and that's his passion, and he has no ego around golf. Other personal stuff aside, around his golf, he was willing to do that, and he said okay. And there was like a year or two where he kind of dropped off the face of the planet, like he was out of the top 100. It was like, oh, who was that guy who was kind of showed some promise, but he's gone now. And then he came back and had that phenomenal run that we all know him for, where he was just winning everything in sight. And he was truly one of the greats. And he was willing to take that one step back to unlock his potential. Whereas a lot of people don't. A lot of people, I'm already number one in the world. What do you know? I'll do it my way because that's what's worked so far. And they're all good. They're great athletes, but they'll never be, one of the greats. And I felt that's true in all sports, but especially in CrossFit, because unfortunately the line between sport and fitness gets blurred in CrossFit. Like if you're not, even the top 1% in the open, like someone who's right near the top of the open who could have potential to be competitive, then you need to stop thinking about it as a sport, because for everyone else, it really is about fitness. You probably got a full-time job, a family, juggling other commitments. Like you don't have the time to put in. You get up at 5 a.m. to train before work. You don't want to. You can't afford to stress your body mentally and physically by doing falling into the trap of trying to train like an athlete in a spare time hours. You got to think, I'm just here to get fit and healthy and stay off the diabetes and heart disease list. And you have to treat the training a whole different way. People fall into this, no one goes and plays a social touch footy comp and gets confused halfway through the season and thinks they're playing the NRL and try to go hard and rupture their knee and all kinds of put their body on the line. Like it'd be silly. You just think we're just here to have a good time, and it gets competitive, but we're just playing around, playing touch footy. But the problem with CrossFit is that because of the previous year's focus on the games, like CrossFit talk about themselves, how much media was about the games, and CrossFit was the games. People who are in the box to get fit and healthy and lose some weight get confused halfway through and think they're training, for the CrossFit games, and they're trying to snatch weight that they shouldn't snatch. And, like the snatch is a great movement, for example. I really believe it's a great movement to learn, and there's so many benefits, but in the purest form, there is really no reason for a human being in their normal lives to put a heavy weight over their head in that position. Like there just isn't. Like if people say to me, I got sore wrists, sore elbows from snatching, what can I do? I just tell them, hey, just snatch lighter. Like just go really light. And they say, oh, but then I'll never PB my snatch. I'll never get like a really heavy snatch. And I always say to them, like, but so who cares? If you're not competing, you don't need a heavy snatch. Like tell me the next time you're going to need to put 100 kilos over your head, like in the office, like on the way to work. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like it's just, you got to think about risk reward. If you can perform the movement pain free, then there's lots of rewards to doing it. But if there's some kind of detriment, if it's hurting you, if there's some mobility restriction that you can't fix, maybe your elbow is just a bit arthritic, or the wrist is a previous injury. If there's a kind of an unchangeable factor that's making the risk too high for the reward, you don't have to do it. Like that's the beauty of CrossFit. It's malleable, interchangeable, it's modular, it's scalable, and there's no exam, there's no test. You're not being told like, well, if you can't snatch, then you'll never be great. Because remember, for 90% of people, you're not going to compete. You're not going to ever need to test these skills. The hour a day of class you do is your entire CrossFit experience. That is your workout. So do things that feel good, that get you a good result, and that don't hurt you. And that's so simple in theory, but like I said, the problem is that there's this confusion, this muddiness with oh no, we're all training for the open. Technically, we're all athletes. Like, come on, everyone has to progress somehow. You need that muscle up because CrossFit Games. But it's like it'd be great to get a muscle up, and if that's your personal journey, like you want to take that goal off, then sure. But you don't need a muscle up. Like, who needs a muscle up? Who needs a snatch? Like, there's certain movements I believe the human body needs to perform, which is you should be able to deadlift, squat, and press over your head. but you might just do that with, half your body weight. Like if you're an aging population, or if you have a back injury, just, lightweight, safely, just moving through the basic human range of motion and keeping yourself mobile into old age. That's great. All the fancy bells and whistles are just that. And people are hurting themselves in pursuit of fancier and fancier skills only because they saw it on TV and think that's what you have to do if you want to do CrossFit.
Well, no, well said. Well said. And it's important that you do refer, it's one of the unique kind of concepts where you have your local box that's filled with more or less 100% of people that are never going to be at the games, or you might have one person there with aspirations, maybe two. And as you were saying there is that 1 or 2% that do push on and want to compete at the games and make a living out of it, and it to be their, sole purpose when they get up and when they go to bed. And you're obviously part of Team Mayhem, which is one of the more renowned teams around. And you do get to train a good bit with the likes of Rich Ronan, who I've previously mentioned, and stuff like that. But I suppose for people who would listen to this, and there is going to be people who are avid CrossFitters, I know a few people have been on to me asking me questions and stuff like that. But say for the people who just say go to the gym or don't even go to the gym, like what does your, say, normal day entail of? Like what are you doing with a diet point of view? Like are you eating crazy amounts of calories? Do you not really care what you eat as long as you have an X amount? And then, like, as I said, are you doing one workout a day? Are you seeing how the body is when you get up? Or is it very kind of regimented, scheduled, like you'd say, have, would say, a professional team? Or is it very much wake up on the day, see how I feel, and then just roll into whatever I do?
Yeah, my approach to nutrition is pretty laid back. I don't necessarily count calories or macros or anything, but I think I eat probably exactly about as much as you'd imagine someone of my body weight and activity level would eat, which is not to say a huge amount. Like it probably wouldn't be as much as, say, a bodybuilder or someone who eats very specifically for like weight gain or for certain kinds of weight manipulation. But I obviously eat probably more than the average person. And it is a case of I just eat when I'm hungry and just make sure the food is relatively good quality. And I do have a nutritionist who I work with around competitions, and she takes care of my meals and actual macros and whatnot around comps to make sure that, in crunch time, that all those factors are removed as much as possible. And typically, obviously very fortunate with my job coaching that I have a pretty flexible schedule. So training, plenty of hours to train and kind of try and be as efficient as possible, just so I can spend more time with the family and obviously not be away all day. So it might be like, a 2 or 3 hour session in the morning where I try and get it all done. Sometimes I'll break up into 2 sessions, train a bit in the morning and then a bit in the afternoon. But typically, most days, I'd say probably like 4 out of 7 days, I can do it in one session, which is still exhausting and a big chunk of your day, but just works out better to only leave the house once as far as with my family. And then the other couple of days, if there's a bit extra volume or something, the endurance sports like your swimming and your running, just because the endurance sports take more time, an event that takes an hour, you got to train in that time domain. So the training takes hours, you might be at the pool for 2 hours. So those kinds of sessions I'll split them up from the CrossFit stuff. So I might do, an hour and a half in the gym in the morning and then go for the hour and a half swim in the afternoon. So it kind of just depends on the day, but it's just about managing the energy levels, I suppose. Like if there's a lot of intense short workouts, even though you could kind of get it done in a couple of hours at the gym, sometimes I'll break it up anyway, because by the third hour, even if you're only doing, a 10-minute workout every 40 minutes, resting for half an hour, at a certain point, you just can't bring the same level of performance and intensity to the workout because you're just getting too tired. It's time to go home, have a rest, have something to eat, come back and resume again in the afternoon. So it's a bit of a case-by-case basis, I suppose. And just for me personally, it's a little bit, I guess it's a bit of a deterministic attitude, but I feel like you really got to feel out your body and see what your body can kind of naturally handle as far as volume. Like I'm pretty fortunate where I don't really feel overtrained very often. I've had very few injuries, and I can kind of I feel good to tackle the full kind of volume every day, the 4 or 5 workouts and a bit of weightlifting every day. Whereas I know for a fact, and I've trained with some people who, after a couple of weeks of that, things start breaking down. Little muscles, little niggles start to, little tendonitis issues creep in, and they can't take that kind of volume. And a lot of the professional guys, like if you went and canvassed all the games athletes, you'll hear different amounts of training per week. So it's not like there's a certain amount you need to do to be great, but you certainly have to be careful that some people are built a little bit cut above the rest, and it's like Tom Brady with the Patriots. Like, I mean, if you watch the documentary on what he does to keep his body in shape, I mean, he does controls every factor there is to control. But even still, even if everyone did what he did and went to the level that he went to, you'd probably find that there's only a few, phenomenons like him that can be playing that well and that injury free into that kind of advanced age in a sport that destructive. And it's kind of the same with CrossFit. Like, some athletes just can weather the storm, and other athletes unfortunately break. And that's a big factor in determining how far you'll go in any sport, I think. And you hear it all the time with Olympic gymnasts. Like, a lot of them get broken in training. They just all kinds of terrible injuries and joints and stuff. And the ones who go on to win, 4 or 5 Olympic medals just seem to be unbreakable. Their body is just super resilient. And that's kind of like a factor you can't really control. It's kind of the luck of the draw, I suppose.
No, that's an interesting point, and it is often overlooked. And even some of the Irish CrossFitters that I know, some of them that do it for a living, I've seen them suffer some pretty horrific injuries that they've had to kind of go through 6-8 months of intense rehab just to be able to get back, and then they're starting at about 70%. But like you were touching on it there with relation to your own aspirations, and even you were saying like your diet is geared towards your own size and what you're required. Like, as you were saying earlier, it's not essentially like the bodybuilding where you've got the big guys with the big guys, the small guys with the small guys, etc. Like, with your weight, it does gear you towards being able to lift heavier weights, which I've seen that you've displayed there in previous CrossFit games where you've gotten personal bests in the field. But is there ever a time, and this might revert back to the whole ego thing, where you may be like, okay, well, listen, I can lift, I can clean really well, I can bench or do this and that, but then my cardio's been settled down? Like, do you ever have that discussion with yourself or even with your coaches where you kind of think, maybe I should look at maybe potentially losing weight? Because if you look at, say, traditionally the CrossFit athletes that tend to do well are people who are, 5'9", 5'8", not absolute giants, not the heaviest in the world. So do you ever kind of contemplate that, where you think, if I want to maybe work up to that top 20, top 30 spot, that I may need to make adjustments? Or do you think, listen, perfection takes time, I got to trust my process, I've got good coaches around me, I've got good work ethic, I'll get there eventually?
Definitely, there's a nice little mix of that. So what I mean by that is, for sure, there's some immutable principles of just if you're heavier, a burpee is harder. And so for sure, there's this balance of not getting too big, not being too heavy, not being too pigeonholed. If you're the big strong guy, that means you're not the light fast guy. And so there's definitely that element of not letting yourself fall too far down the rabbit hole. And here's the other thing too. This is the amazing thing about CrossFit and just the exposure of so many athletes. There's always a bigger fish, and you can be the biggest, strongest, most powerful looking guy, and some dude half your weight and half your height can probably clean and jerk more than you. And so you can't put too much emphasis on that one hill to die on about how you're the strong guy. I always win the strength events, because one day you won't. There'll be someone stronger, small, and who's smaller and also better at burpees and can still squat more than you. So you really have to be, personally, as far as your own, looking at yourself, trying to be in that middle of the road, trying not to get too heavy, trying to get too powerful where you lose the endurance, trying not to be too fit where you lose the speed. And so you're working on that within yourself. But at the same time, and this is the kind of the dichotomy of it, at the same time, when it comes to the field, doesn't matter how, for example, myself, doesn't matter how small I try and get and how fast I try and be, I'm not going to be as small and as fast as someone like Dan Bailey, who is naturally geared towards being a sprinter. He's shorter, he's powerful. So I could waste a couple of years trying to get closer to his level of speed and power, and still not be good, not be fast enough. And in that time, I lose all my strength and my resilience. Let's say if I lose too much weight and my body gets a bit too underweight, and I start to get injured by all the loading that goes to the body, and so I would lose my advantage. Because at the end of the day, it's still a bit of a comparison of, it's kind of like there's more than one way to the goal. Like there's more than one way to tackle the task, and if you lose your advantage to try and build your weaknesses up, your weaknesses are still your weaknesses. Like they're still the weakest part of your game. You can make them a lot better, so you'll just come middle of the pack and kind of be a nobody. Whereas if you can keep your strengths relatively high and hit some home runs, some top 3 finishes, that's going to add up to a lot more points. The downside of that is that if you invest too much time in your strengths to get that one event win, and your weakness is truly like being left behind and neglected, then that weakness will also be an event last. You'll come last in an event, and then you kind of, the points are too far the other way. So there's this constant battle between, you have to work with your natural gifts and stay in your lane, so to speak, but you are constantly trying to kind of find the perfect you. And the perfect me is a little different from the perfect Matt Fraser. So Matt's smaller, he's quicker, he's kind of more of a gymnast, as far as like he's lighter, less weight to press overhead when he does a handstand push-up, so forth. But then he's also an incredibly good mover, very powerful, very strong, can lift a lot of weight. On the other hand, I'm naturally geared towards lifting weight, not necessarily powerful like Olympic lifter, but definitely like your power lifts, like your deadlift, squat. I'm a bit of a slower twitch, but I still have to work on my gymnastics to make sure I don't lose by too much. Because that's the other thing about CrossFit, is that the elements are mixed. There's rarely just an event where it's just me and Matt doing burpees. It'll be burpees into a rope climb, into a clean, and so there's he'll smoke me on the burpees, but then I've definitely got the reach advantage on a rope climb, and potentially my body can handle the cleans a bit better than Matt. Now he's a bad example to use because he's the best in the world right now. He is perfecting the game where there's very few things he can't do well. So that is the goal, right? He's a short guy who can lift a lot of weight. It's kind of the perfect balance. But there's other smaller guys who are Matt's size that couldn't, that would be like 30 or 40 pounds under my lifts. And so that's the great battle. Like, who's going to win, the strength or the speed? It depends on the workout a little bit, and depends on which of the fast guys have been working on their strength enough, which of the strong guys have been doing enough speed, and who can, if, assuming you'll win the thing you're good at, who can have the next best finish on the thing they're bad at. And that's the great game.
Yeah, it's always just not so much a guessing game, but there's always something to chase after, so to speak, no matter what ranking you are, what your aspirations are, so to speak. But like, looking from your own perspective, like, I do know there was kind of a reshuffle in the games in relation to where it is in the calendar year now. Like yourself, like if you look at, say, where you started back in, what was it, about 2012, 2013, you've seen like even your overall rank, it's generally just, it's improved year by year. But like, is there a part of you now that is really like wanting to push into, maybe the top 50 in the overall rankings? Or like, do you just set yourself goals of kind of short-term things where, okay, train really good this week, there might be a tournament coming up soon that I want to kind of perform well in? Like, what are your aspirations leading into, I suppose, the start of your prep, or kind of the just over the start of your prep towards the next games?
Yeah, for me right now, things have been, perspective has shifted for me personally, just because of now having the 2 boys, having a little family. So Jack, my eldest, is about 2.5, and Harry, my youngest, is about 7 months. And so for me, I made the games in 2018 as an individual, which I hadn't actually planned on. I didn't think I was good enough yet, but that's kind of the beauty of it. If you're just doing the work and doing the things you got to do, the results kind of come when you least expect it, because you don't know what everyone else is doing or what their You can't control the other athletes on the field. You just work on yourself, and then your performance, is either good enough or not, depending on the field. And so that was a huge like goal ticked off a big dream essentially ticked off a list to have made it individually. And then just this last year, so 2019 season, and now this 2020 season, which we're kind of technically in. I've just decided to be going with the team, like on a team focus with obviously Mayhem Independence, because just training wise and competing wise, it's a little bit more conducive to the family life. Not that it's easier in any way, because it's a different kind of fitness on the team. There's it's kind of a blend of the relay workouts where you work kind of one for one with your team members are much faster and more intense than individual, because the work demand is smaller for that one event. So it really is a case of put it all on the line. Whereas there's very few individual workouts where it's smart to burn yourself that quickly. Everything's a bit of a pacing game in the individual. But the team workouts, there's a lot more of those turn and burn kind of workouts. So that's a kind of a different experience. And then the other longer kind of team workouts where you might work with the worm or do some things that are like team building reps is different again, because it's this big machine that's moving together. And so to go fast or to go slow is a harder, it's a big ship to steer. Like you turn the wheel, the ship doesn't just turn left. It takes time to maneuver the beast. And so the intensity is kind of lower in that way, that it's more about keeping your wits about you and moving steady, and just not falling behind your team and letting them down, versus individual, where it's just the bar is lying there in front of you. You either pick it up or you keep resting. So it's just you got to be willing to, whoever can hurt the most and pick the bar up more times is going to win the event. Whereas the team, it's a lot more strategic on those workouts versus the relay workouts, which are kind of the opposite, where it's way less strategic than individuals, and it's more about going hard. So it's harder and easier in different ways than individual. But I think like the training wise and the relative skill you need is a little bit lighter on, because a good team doesn't need to be as fit as the next four. They just need to be smarter and work better together. Whereas individually, almost always, apart from very few exceptions, the fitter athletes win. So it's just a matter of pushing your capacity through the roof and better and out-training everyone else. Whereas the teams is about outsmarting everyone else in a way. And also, of course, you have to have the physical ability to back up your game plan. If you have a great strategy for your team, but you don't have the fitness to actually pull the strategy off, then you're not going to win. So it's just for me personally, I find it easier to balance my home life, a little bit less pressure out on the competition floor, because you have the team members to work with, and it just keeps things a bit more interesting. So for this year and for last year and for this year, it was team focus. And honestly, when my boys are a bit older and things are a little bit less crazy back home, I'll probably look to go individual again. And then at that point, the goals will need to be set, and don't just go to the games to splash around, have a good time, because that's one way to guarantee you'll come last. You need to go in there with a plan of like, I want top 10 or I want top 20, and you have to fight for that, because that's the only way that you'll actually know. It's the only way to actually achieve a goal is to have one, obviously.
So yeah, Royce, it's interesting that you'd say that just with relation to the team and kind of the shift in mentality towards the workouts, and what you were referring to there is that it suits your training regime a little bit, the demands of your personal life obviously as well, and then also you just seem to vibe a bit more off it. And like, you've done a few events now with the likes of Rich Frohn and many other big names as well in the industry. Like, have you set goals? Has your team set goals of what you want to be doing? Because there's certain teams you could end up going with as well. It's not like you'll be with the same team for the rest of your CrossFit career. Like, do you set yourself goals on maybe winning a CrossFit Games in a team event? Or, as I said, is it kind of just very much see what team I get settled down on and take it from there?
I'm definitely the guys I'm working with for this season. I did a couple of events with last season, and so it was very intentional for us to come back together and chase some more success this season. We had a really good season last year, but unfortunately we just missed out on a couple of chances to qualify, just by a pretty narrow margin. So we were keen to refocus, come back and punch that ticket. And then we're pretty confident. I mean, I guess everyone is. That's the whole point. But we're pretty confident that we can make some noise at the games. And if we were to qualify, the focus for sure would be somewhere in the top 5, if not on the podium. And I think it's important that everyone who goes to the games is playing for something like that. Otherwise, you definitely won't do well if you're just going to see how you go. Everyone's gunning for the podium, obviously, and the person who comes last was technically gunning for the podium. So it's obviously in the hands of the competition, but that would be the goal that we would set for ourselves. And then in the future, I mean, I have a good relationship with Mayhem and with those guys, and so I would be available and I guess what's the word, receptive to any kind of offer they would need me for or want me for. But I would also, I think, after this year, I'll look at possibly renewing, especially when my boys are a bit older, possibly renewing my individual career and going back to the games as an individual and setting some goals for myself there and trying to be ambitious with my goal setting around my individual placement as well. So I'm not completely off the individual game. It's just at this stage of my life, the team is a really good experience. It's really fun, very rewarding. And then, it does depend, as we were saying, on some personal life factors, with my 2 boys and what stage of life we'll be in as to exactly whether next year is the individual, my individual return, or whether I maybe push it back a few more years, but we'll see. But definitely that's on the horizon as well.
No, they're all reasonable points, Royce. And I suppose the last thing I'd like just to ask you before we just finish up with a quick fire round is, like, you've pretty much been with CrossFit, not since maybe the very origins of it, but like since it's kind of come into the global scene, and that it's really picked up all across the world. No matter where I go on holidays, I always see CrossFit gyms, whether it's in mental places in Europe or in the UK, or even if I'm over in America on the West Coast, New York, there's always a box somewhere to be seen. So I suppose the question I'd pose to you is, you're at both sides of the coin, whether you're coaching, whether you're also competing as well. Like, do you see still room for CrossFit to evolve? Because in the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's really grown strength to strength and popularity. And it seems like even the knowledge of it and the coaching has gotten better. Like, do you still think, as a whole collective sport, from the ground up to the very top, number 1 rank guy, do you still feel there's more left in the tank for it to evolve and become a more complete idea and kind of sport, or whatever you want to frame it at?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, I think on the grassroots, there's more room for more people who want to just get healthy and get active in an easy to do way, and in a way that's gonna that promotes great community and a healthy relationship with exercise and diet. I think there's every day at our gym we get new people walking in who've never heard of CrossFit or heard of it in passing, and but they just want to get fit and healthy, and it just looks interesting to them, and they want to know about it, and then they fall in love. And so we see that happening all the time. From a sporting perspective, from the top level, I think while these changes this last year and obviously this year has been kind of scary and jarring and a bit, it's not what people are used to, and everyone a lot of people miss the old way. Yeah, I think change is always scary and always messy, and the first couple of years are always a bit of a bumpy transition. But I think that with the sanctioned events and this kind of, as Glassman says, this democratizing of CrossFit, of the sport, I think that's only going to lead to bigger and better things. Like I was fortunate enough the other day to be involved in a bit of training camp for the Penrith Panthers, one of the rugby league teams here in Australia. And all their coaches were there, and all their trainers were there.
I know them.
And they all had their training jerseys on, and all the jerseys had just a big emblazoned logo on the front for a flavored milk company here in Australia called Oak. And I was laughing at myself, because there's flavored milk has very little to do with rugby, and a lot of the teams have insurance companies on their jersey as their major sponsor, and that's got very little to do with rugby. But that's the point. In a professional sport, those jerseys are just a billboard. Home and contents insurance, car brands, flavored milks. that's the kind of companies that throw big money at these sporting brands. And in CrossFit at the moment, every CrossFit company, quote unquote, every CrossFit sponsor is some kind of niche little CrossFit brand, right? Like they sell wrist straps, or they sell fit drinks, or they sell barbells. And I think with this opening up of CrossFit to the world and to the third parties and to people with maybe a different idea of how to run an event and different resources, different contacts, you can see the rise of CrossFit as a real sport one day. With a comp being sponsored by a home insurance company, or there's a comp in Mexico that was run by Gatorade, and so I think that's where the money is. That's where athletes can become professionals and get paid a wage, and brands can find value add when if Toyota has its big Toyota logo in the middle of an arena for a weekend while everyone does CrossFit and does barbell thrusters on top of a Toyota logo. That's eyes on Toyota, right? Like, what does it matter that CrossFit has nothing to do with Toyota? Like, that's not how advertising works. Advertising is about getting eyes on your product on a billboard or on a TV commercial. So I think CrossFit not just being this like talent show as it was. The games used to be like this talent show. Everyone comes in from around the world, does their thing, the best person leaves with a paycheck, and all these CrossFit brands sell their stuff to CrossFitters. I think making it a legit sport that someone who doesn't necessarily do CrossFit might flick on the TV on a Saturday just because they're a sport lover, and you know what, it's rugby off season, so I'll just watch a bit of CrossFit. Like, why not? I'll watch a bit of golf. That's the future of CrossFit, I think, to become a household sport where people don't confuse the sport with the training, so that people who are in the gym who are there to get fit, they do their WOD in the box and don't try and break themselves by doing extra volume. People who aren't CrossFitters themselves still watch the sport to appreciate it, just like I don't golf, but I'll watch a highlight reel of Tiger Woods, hitting hole-in-ones because it's fun. And I think that's the future of it, getting to the point where the sport is a sport on its own legs. It's not just what it currently is, which I think is a bad thing, which is people just assume the sport is like the fitness program after a few years. You know what I mean? Like, you, as a random person at the box, plus 5 years of hard training is the CrossFit Games. It's like, it's not a matter of average Joe puts in the time and he'll be a games athlete. It truly is like a sport where, unfortunately, you kind of need to come in with a certain amount of natural talent. Like, I've talked to weightlifting coaches who say they have their, when they go and talent search at high schools for future weightlifters to represent Australia, and they'll get the kids to do an overhead squat on a barbell. And they say, it sounds cruel, but the kids that just can't do an overhead squat well, like they got tight shoulders, tight knees, tight hips, whatever, they think, look, it's going to be so much work to get you back to zero that you're just probably not going to be great. Whereas the kid that can hit an overhead squat perfectly, just has this natural mobility and coordination, well, now we got something to work with. And not to say that, like I said, it's very deterministic logic, right? Like, anyone can work hard and be good. But you can't deny in the competitive landscape of world sports that certain people are born a little bit closer to the finish line than others. Kipchoge, or whatever his name is, the marathon runner who just ran the 2-hour marathon. I'm sure there are hundreds of people who train just as hard, if not harder than him. But he's also just a 1 in a million athlete, once in a generation who can do the things he can do. And you look at Usain Bolt's, whose own training partner couldn't beat him. The training partner does literally what he does in training. They're training partners. And Usain Bolt was just born to win. Michael Phelps was born to win. Now, of course, they work hard. That's a given. But the fact is that there are many other people working just as hard as them who couldn't come near them. And that's because talent does play a big role, even though we all like to pretend that it's all just hard work and elbow grease. Talent is a huge factor in determining the best in the world. Now, there's plenty of room below the best. Sports are big sports. You've got team sports. There's 16 people on a team. Not all 16 of you have to be the 16 best in the world. Some of you might be pretty crap, but you're on a good team and you can do your job. So there's plenty of room below the best. But at the same time, sports, like every sport, CrossFit needs to be viewed as there's a certain population that are naturally going to do well at this and put the time in and can be great. And most people need to appreciate the sport for what it is, love watching it, and then go back to the box and do their thing and not worry about it. not get hurt in the pursuit of that sport just because they assume that's the natural progression, because it's not.
So yeah, definitely a lot of that does come down to, as you were saying, genetics, and people can work just as hard as other people, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's like myself. I can bench very good, but I can't clean very good. So certain people are good at other bits, some people not so much at others. So I suppose it's the luck of the draw, so to say. But just as we've discussed, it's about putting yourself in the best possible position. But now, Royce, like
Yeah,
what I
that's
normally
it.
do is I finish with a quick fire round, and anything that comes into your head. And when I mean anything, the first thing that comes into your head, you can just shout it back, and I will start asking away. So, if you could do a WOD with three non-related CrossFit people, who'd you pick?
Probably go with Rich Froning, Josh Bridges, and Matt Fraser.
Okay, you must have misheard me. I said three non-related CrossFit people. So we're getting two for the price of one from an answer point of view, anyway.
Sorry, I'm with you now. I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'd pick Luke Combs. Uh, Probably go with Tiger Woods and Rafael Nadal. Purely because I just want to meet those three guys.
What is your favorite workout or WOD, so to speak?
Uh, I feel like the longer I do CrossFit, the less, the harder that question is to answer because I hate them all. Probably my favorite named workout is Amanda with the squat snatches and muscle ups.
Okay.
It's a fun one.
Your favorite film of all time?
Any of the Star Wars, all of the Star Wars, I can't separate them. Got to treat it
Okay.
as one big movie saga.
Has a new one come out in Australia?
Literally, it came out at midnight this morning, so I'm booked a ticket to go see it tonight at 7:45 my time.
Okay, enjoy that. I'm looking forward to it
Yeah.
myself. What song would you play to get yourself psyched or up for a big lift?
One of my favorite songs of all time to fire up with is I think it's called "Into the Shallows" by Thrice.
Okay, I'll give that a listen to on my way to work tomorrow. Get me up for the day.
Yeah, it's heavy on. It's kind of punky.
What is your current personal best on bench, clean, and squat?
In kilos, it's 160 for the bench. I've hit a 171 clean, and what was the last one? Squat.
Squat, yeah.
My best all time squat was 225 kilos.
Not bad. And the craziest thing you've seen doing CrossFit?
Um, Craziest movement.
Or anything,
Recently,
even in a workout or something that you're like, that is completely insane or crazy.
I see some pretty interesting interpretations of the movements every day at the gym. With new people. Um, it's just some funny ideas of how to move. But I think probably the craziest thing I've seen, which ironically was at the Filthy 150 over in Ireland. I think
Okay.
it's, in my opinion, it's unfortunately a case of a great idea, just not good in practice, which was the event where they had to throw the sandbag, like clean the sandbag for distance over their shoulder. So it was a
Yeah.
sandbag off the ground, and then it was you actually scored by how far it goes. I just think it's not. I don't know. It's a silly. It's a great idea. It comes from that strongman. The idea of they throw the med balls or they throw the sandbags
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff, which I like that. But I just think the loading and the way people moved with the bag was just it didn't look great. I don't think it was a good test. I think the workout could have either just been a sandbag clean or a much lighter bag thrown a further distance potentially. But I think just the simpler you keep CrossFit stuff, the better. I think when you try and get too tricky, you lose some of the test for kind of the gimmick of it.
Well, it's good to know Ireland have made a Q&A for once, albeit
Yeah.
maybe for the wrong reasons, but we'll take it all the same. And second last one is your favorite TV comedy character of all time.
Favorite TV comedy character of all time? I'd probably go Michael Scott from The Office.
Oh, have you seen the British Office? Out of
I
curiosity.
have, yeah, I have seen The British Office. Yeah, I like
And
I do love the British Office, but what I like about the American Office is they wrote it to be a longer series. The British Office was a mini
yeah,
series, but because they constructed the American Office to be a 5 season plus kind of story arc, there's a bit more like storyline to it. There's more character development. All the characters are a bit more endearing. Whereas Ricky Gervais himself said he made the British Office to just like make you mad at like how dumb this guy is.
yeah. And lastly, Royce, and this is what most people do struggle with, is sum yourself up in 3 words.
Hardworking would be my first hyphenated word. Hardworking, stubborn, and funny.
Well, listen, Royce, that wraps it up. And Wi-Fi issues aside, I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to have a chat with you. Long overdue. And yeah, listen, thanks a million for coming on. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next 10, 11 months holds for you. And I'd say in the meantime, enjoy the workouts, enjoy looking after the family, and have a good Christmas on my end. And if I get a chance to have a chat with the organisers of the Filthy 150, I'll tell them that the sandbag throw is definitely a no-go for next year's event.
Yeah, mate. Thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries, Royce. Listen, all the best, and thanks a million for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Merry Christmas.